I thought my wife, Emma, was a powerhouse, running a successful business while balancing life with me. Turns out, she wasn't just balancing, she was juggling lives. The thought replayed in my head as I stared at the framed wedding photo on my desk. It had been 12 years since that day, and if you had asked me back then, I would have told you without hesitation that Emma and I were rock solid. We were the dream team. She ran her marketing firm, jet-setting to international conferences, while I built my tech consulting business from the ground up. We weren't just spouses, we were partners. Emma had always been the ambitious type, smart, driven, magnetic. People were drawn to her, myself included. I'd always admired how she could walk into a room and own it without even trying. That was one of the reasons I fell for her. While I preferred to stay behind the scenes, she thrived in the spotlight. Our relationship had its quirks, her long work hours and frequent travel were par for the course, but we made it work. Or so I thought. It started subtly, like the first crack in a windshield. Emma's trips had always been brief, a week here, a few days there. Then, one day last year, she came home with news that she'd landed a huge client, a European brand expanding into the US market. It was a career-defining opportunity, but it came with a catch: she'd need to spend 6 months overseas to establish their presence. At first, I was thrilled for her. 6 months felt like a long time, but Emma assured me it would be worth it. "This is everything I've worked for, Matt," she'd said, her green eyes sparkling with excitement. "We'll be stronger for it. Distance makes the heart grow fonder, right?" I smiled and nodded, even as unease prickled at the back of my mind. I told myself I was just being selfish. Emma deserved this. Her departure was bittersweet. We FaceTimed daily at first, but as the weeks turned into months, our conversations grew shorter, more sporadic. She blamed it on her workload. I blamed it on the time difference. I didn't press her, not wanting to seem insecure. But the distance wasn't just physical, it felt like she was slipping away from me. Then came the announcement. Emma returned from Europe 3 months ago, looking radiant. She had a glow about her, the kind you couldn't miss. I figured it was the success of her project. We were sitting at the dinner table when she dropped the bombshell. "I have some big news," she said, twirling spaghetti onto her fork with a casualness that didn't match the magnitude of her words. "What's up?" I asked, already smiling. "I'm pregnant." My fork froze mid-air. "Pregnant?" She nodded, beaming. "We're going to be parents." For a moment, I was stunned. We'd talked about kids before, years ago, but life got busy, and the topic faded into the background. Now, it was suddenly front and center, and I wasn't sure how to feel. "That's amazing," I said, though my voice didn't carry the enthusiasm I'd hoped for. Emma didn't seem to notice. She launched into a detailed account of how excited she was to become a mom, how this was the next chapter in our lives. But as the weeks went by, something about the timing didn't sit right with me. My gut told me to do the math, and when I did, it didn't add up. Emma had been gone for 6 months. According to her due date, the pregnancy began 3 months ago, after she returned. But here's the thing, we hadn't been intimate since she got back. At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe I'd miscalculated or misunderstood. But the more I thought about it, the more questions piled up. Why did her overseas project feel so shrouded in mystery? Why did her stories about her time in Europe feel so rehearsed, so vague? And most importantly, why hadn't she brought up the pregnancy sooner? The doubts festered, gnawing at the edges of my mind like termites in the foundation of our marriage. I wanted to believe her, to trust her implicitly like I always had. But something about this didn't feel right. And so, for the first time in our 12 years together, I began to wonder, was Emma hiding something? That nagging feeling wouldn't let go. I told myself I was overthinking it, that Emma had given me no reason to doubt her. But once suspicion takes root, it grows fast, twisting every detail into something darker. The tipping point came on a quiet Thursday night. Emma had gone to bed early, claiming exhaustion, leaving me alone in the living room with her work laptop. She often used it for personal emails too, and seeing it sitting there, unlocked and unattended, was like hearing a siren's call. I hesitated. We'd never been the kind of couple to snoop on each other. Trust was the cornerstone of our marriage, or at least it used to be. But this wasn't just idle curiosity, it felt like self-preservation. I opened the laptop, the glow of the screen casting an eerie light on the room. Her email was already logged in. At first, everything seemed normal. Work correspondence, scheduling updates, newsletters. I almost laughed at myself for being paranoid. But then, buried halfway down her inbox, a string of emails caught my eye. The subject lines were innocuous: updates, catch up, miss you, but the sender stood out, Daniel S. My pulse quickened as I clicked on the first email. Subject, updates. From, Daniel S. Hey, love. The apartment feels so empty without you. I miss the sound of your laugh echoing in the kitchen. Counting down the days until we're together again. Yours. Daniel. I stared at the words, my mind struggling to process them. Love. Together again. My hands shook as I opened another email. Subject, miss you. From, Daniel S. Emma. I can still taste our last night together. It's torture waking up alone after having you here for so long. 6 months wasn't enough, was it? Please tell me you're still thinking about the plan. I know this isn't easy, but we'll figure it out. We always do. All my love. Daniel. 6 months. The same 6 months she'd been overseas for work. My chest tightened as realization crashed over me. This wasn't just an affair, Emma had been living with him. I felt sick. My stomach churned as I clicked through the emails, each one more damning than the last. There were plans for weekend getaways, affectionate pet names, even references to private jokes I couldn't begin to understand. One email included a photo, a candid shot of Emma and Daniel standing on a balcony overlooking the Paris skyline. She was laughing, leaning into him, her head resting on his shoulder. The woman in the picture looked carefree, glowing. She looked like a stranger. I closed the laptop, my heart pounding. My wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had been leading a double life. But I couldn't stop there. I needed more. If Emma had been lying about the nature of her trip, what else had she hidden? The next day, while she was at work, I took a deeper dive. The laptop led me to a shared calendar, where I found notes about dinners, outings, and flights, none of which matched the story she told me. A quick search on her phone bill revealed hours of international calls made to Daniel's number, many of them late at night when she claimed to be working late. It was like unraveling a tightly knit sweater. Each thread I pulled revealed a little more of the truth. Emma's 6-month business trip wasn't a career opportunity, it was an escape. She hadn't been working tirelessly in a foreign office. She'd been building a life with another man. I found Daniel's social media profiles easily enough. His Instagram painted a picture that made my blood boil, photos of wine glasses set for two, a shadowy figure that was unmistakably Emma in the background of one post, and captions like, "The best things in life are worth waiting for." I dug deeper, uncovering that Daniel was a freelance consultant based in Europe. His sleek, modern apartment matched the one in the background of Emma's video calls. She'd even joked once about how much she loved the charming aesthetic of her temporary accommodations. It wasn't temporary. It was his home. The betrayal hit me in waves. First came the anger, hot and blinding. How dare she? How could she? But anger quickly gave way to hurt, a deep ache in my chest that refused to let me breathe. I wasn't just losing my wife, I'd already lost her. I sat there for hours, replaying every moment of the past year, searching for signs I'd missed. The excitement in her voice when she first mentioned the trip. The vague updates about her work. The way she'd slowly but surely drifted away from me, like a ship untethering itself from the dock. By the time Emma came home that evening, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to confront her yet. I needed more time to gather my thoughts, to figure out my next move. She walked into the kitchen, kissed my cheek, and asked how my day was. I smiled tightly, swallowing the bitter taste in my mouth. Same as usual. You? Oh, busy, she said breezily, pulling a bottle of wine from the fridge. You know how it is. I nodded, watching her as she poured herself a glass. She looked so calm, so confident, so at ease in the web of lies she'd spun. But now, I knew the truth. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Confronting Emma wasn't something I could rush into. Every moment I waited felt like sand slipping through an hourglass, but I wanted the setting to work in my favor. If I lost control of the situation, Emma would try to spin it her way. So I chose her favorite restaurant. The one where we'd celebrated anniversaries, promotions, and milestones. A place where, for over a decade, we'd shared countless laughs and toasts. Now, it would be the site of our reckoning. When I suggested the dinner, Emma seemed delighted, almost relieved. That sounds wonderful, Matt. It's been ages since we had a proper date night. Her enthusiasm made my stomach churn. I wasn't sure if she genuinely wanted to reconnect or if she thought she was maintaining her facade. Either way, I kept my face neutral. We arrived at the restaurant, and the hostess greeted us warmly, leading us to a cozy corner booth. Emma ordered a glass of Chardonnay, while I stuck to water, my appetite replaced by a growing sense of resolve. The conversation started light, as it always did. She talked about her day, the clients she was juggling, and her excitement about the baby. I nodded along, pretending to listen, but my mind was already planning the moment I'd bring everything crashing down. Finally, as the waiter cleared our plates, I leaned forward. Emma, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. She smiled, sipping her wine. Of course. What's on your mind? I slid my phone across the table, the screen displaying one of Daniel's emails. Her expression shifted, confusion, then recognition, followed by a flash of panic so brief I almost missed it. What's this? She asked, her voice steady but her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. You tell me, I said, keeping my tone calm. Seems like you and Daniel had quite the connection during your time in Europe. She laughed, though it sounded forced. Daniel? He's just a colleague. You've got it all wrong, Matt. Really? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Then explain why he's calling you love and talking about how much he misses you. Seems a little informal for a professional relationship. Emma's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. It's cultural. You know how Europeans are. They're more affectionate with their words. Affectionate? I repeated, scrolling to another email and turning the screen toward her. Does that explain why he mentioned tasting you? That doesn't sound like a cultural difference, Emma. Her face drained of color, and for the first time, she looked genuinely nervous. I don't know what he meant by that. Maybe he was joking. Don't, I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. Don't insult my intelligence. I've read all the emails. I've seen the pictures. This wasn't some harmless misunderstanding. You lived with him, didn't you? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Matt, you're being ridiculous. I stayed in a company-provided apartment. It wasn't his. Stop lying. I hissed, slamming my hand on the table. Heads turned, but I didn't care. The apartment in the pictures is the same one you showed me on your video calls. The same one he tagged in his Instagram posts. How stupid do you think I am? Emma's eyes welled with tears, but I refused to let them soften me. Okay, she whispered, her voice breaking. Okay, fine. I stayed with him. But it wasn't like you think. Wasn't it? I leaned back, folding my arms. You're pregnant, Emma. Am I even the father? Her lips trembled, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it again. But then she broke. It's yours, she said, barely audible. I swear it's yours, Matt. How can I believe anything you say? I shot back. You've lied to me for months. You lied about your trip, about him, about everything. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Her tears spilled over, and she reached across the table for my hand. I pulled it away. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I was lonely, Matt. You were so consumed with work, with your clients, with everything but me. I felt invisible. Daniel was there. He made me feel seen, appreciated. I stared at her, incredulous. So this is my fault. I worked hard to give us a good life, and your response was to cheat on me. To build a whole other life with another man. It wasn't like that, she insisted. It was a mistake, okay? I got caught up in the moment, and it went too far. I never stopped loving you. Loving me? I laughed bitterly. You have a funny way of showing it. Do you even realize what you've done? You destroyed our marriage, Emma. You made me question everything I thought I knew about you. She sobbed openly now, drawing more curious glances from nearby tables. The waitress approached, looking concerned, but I waved her off. Matt, please, Emma pleaded. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. We can go to therapy, start fresh. I'll cut Daniel out of my life completely. Just give me a chance. I stared at her, my heart warring with my head. Part of me wanted to believe her, to forgive her, to fight for the life we'd built together. But the other part, the part that couldn't unsee those emails or unhear her excuses, knew the damage was already done. I don't know if I can do that, I said finally, my voice cold and distant. You've crossed a line, Emma. And some things can't be undone. Her sobs grew quieter, but the devastation in her eyes was unmistakable. For once, she had no more lies, no more defenses. Just the raw truth of what she'd done. As we left the restaurant, the weight of her betrayal settled over me like a storm cloud. This wasn't just the end of a dinner, it felt like the end of us. And as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't let her off the hook. Not this time. I sat alone in the darkened living room, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound cutting through the silence. Emma had gone to bed hours ago, her tearful pleas still echoing in my mind. But I wasn't moved. I wasn't sure I'd ever be moved by her again. My gaze wandered to the photos on the mantel, snapshots of a life that felt like someone else's. There we were on our wedding day, her smile radiant, my arm tight around her waist. Another picture showed us hiking in Colorado, laughing at the top of a mountain we'd spent hours climbing. There was even one of her kissing my cheek as I held the plaque from my first major business award. Every one of those moments felt like a lie now. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, and let the weight of it all hit me. The memories, the love, the trust, it had all been a foundation built on sand, eroded by her deceit. I thought back to the little things, the moments I'd once cherished. The way Emma used to rest her head on my shoulder during movie nights, the way she'd leave sticky notes on the fridge with little messages like, "Good luck today," or "Don't forget to eat lunch." How long had it been since she'd done that? How long had she been drifting away from me, and I hadn't even noticed? The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't just the affair. It was the audacity of it. The lies, the cover-ups, the sheer cruelty of smiling in my face while she lived a double life. And the pregnancy. The pregnancy. My hands clenched into fists as I thought about it. She'd sworn the child was mine, but how could I believe her? I replayed the timeline over and over in my head, and no matter how I spun it, doubt clung to every detail. The possibility that the baby could be his turned my stomach. I'd always wanted to be a father, but not like this. Not with this shadow hanging over my head, threatening to taint what should have been one of the happiest times in my life. I thought of Daniel. The emails, the pictures, the smug little notes he'd sent her about their future. Did he know she was pregnant? Did he think it was his child? The thought made my blood boil. My anger, sharp and hot, burned through the sadness like a wildfire. Emma's tears at the restaurant had felt hollow, like an actress caught in her own web of lies. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done, she was sorry she'd been caught. And now, she was scrambling to salvage the wreckage she'd created. But I wasn't going to let her. I stood and began to pace, the wheels in my mind turning faster with each step. If she thought she could walk away from this unscathed, she was in for a rude awakening. Emma had shattered the trust between us, humiliated me, and threatened the very foundation of our marriage. If she wanted to see how far I'd go to protect myself, I'd show her. First, I needed evidence. I couldn't rely on her to be honest, and I wasn't about to get dragged through a divorce without proof. The emails and photos I'd already found were a good start, but I needed more. Something that left no room for doubt. I grabbed my laptop and started digging. It didn't take long to piece together Daniel's life. His consulting business was thriving, but it depended heavily on his reputation. A scandal like this could ruin him, especially if it became public knowledge. Emma's career, too, had vulnerabilities. Her marketing firm thrived on partnerships and client trust. If word got out about her infidelity and the deception surrounding her trip, she'd have a hard time rebuilding her professional image. The more I uncovered, the more determined I became. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about accountability. Emma and Daniel had taken so much from me. They deserved to feel the consequences. The plan began to take shape, fueled by a cold, calculated anger I didn't know I was capable of. First, I'd contact a private investigator. I needed documentation of everything, Emma's whereabouts during her trip, Daniel's involvement, even the financial details she'd kept hidden. If she'd funneled any of our money into this affair, I'd find it. Next, I'd ensure the truth reached the right people. Emma's family, who'd always adored her, would know what she'd done. Our mutual friends, who believed we were the perfect couple, would see the cracks she'd created. And Daniel's professional network? They'd learn exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. But I wasn't stopping there. The pregnancy had to be addressed. I'd demand a paternity test. If the child wasn't mine, Emma would have to face the reality of her choices. And if it was mine, I'd fight for full custody. There was no way I'd let her drag an innocent child into the mess she'd made. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I had a plan. It wasn't just about punishing Emma, it was about reclaiming my life. I sat back, exhausted but resolute. For years, I'd built my life around her, trusting her implicitly. I'd sacrificed time, energy, and so much more to support her dreams. And she'd repaid me with lies. This wasn't going to break me. No, this was my turning point. Emma had played her game, and now, it was my turn. The private investigator, Roger Blake, came highly recommended. A retired detective with a reputation for thoroughness, he took one look at my case and nodded grimly. "This won't take long," he said. True to his word, Roger delivered. Within 2 weeks, I had a detailed dossier that confirmed every suspicion, and uncovered even more. Emma's affair with Daniel wasn't just personal, it had financial strings attached. Roger unearthed evidence of Emma using our joint accounts to fund her flights, lavish dinners, and even a surprise weekend getaway for the two of them in the French countryside. Daniel, the prominent consultant, had been living a charmed life partially funded by my hard-earned money. But the biggest revelation? Daniel wasn't just a consultant, he was an advisor to several high-profile clients who valued discretion above all else. A scandal involving him could shake the trust underpinning his career. Roger's investigation also provided a clear timeline of Emma's deceit. Photos, receipts, and even surveillance footage painted a damning picture. With every piece of evidence I reviewed, my resolve hardened. I wasn't just going to walk away from this quietly. Emma and Daniel had played me, and now, it was my turn to play them. The first domino fell when I sent an anonymous email to Emma's largest client. The message included screenshots of her emails with Daniel, emphasizing how her business trip had been anything but professional. I sent similar emails to a handful of her other clients, carefully choosing my words to highlight the betrayal of trust. The fallout was immediate. Within days, Emma's clients began pulling out of their contracts, citing concerns about her professionalism. Her marketing firm's reputation, built on the image of integrity she'd so carefully curated, crumbled. Next came Daniel. I crafted an equally anonymous tip to his top clients, attaching the same evidence and a pointed note about his questionable ethics. I knew how critical reputation was in his line of work, and I wasn't wrong. A week later, I saw the headlines: top consultant faces scandal over affair and misuse of funds. Roger's contacts in the media had ensured the story gained traction, complete with enough details to make Daniel's involvement unmistakable. Emma and Daniel had underestimated me. They'd assumed I would be too hurt, too passive, to fight back. But now, their professional lives were in freefall. The family gathering was the next stage of my plan. Emma's parents were hosting a Sunday lunch, one of those warm, cheerful events where everyone reminisced about old times. I arrived with a folder tucked discreetly under my arm, my heart pounding as I prepared for what I had to do. Emma greeted me at the door, her smile strained. She'd been walking on eggshells since the confrontation at the restaurant, trying to act like everything was fine. But I wasn't here to play along. The meal started innocently enough. Her mother fussed over the roast, her father recounted a golfing story, and her younger brother teased me about my inability to hit a curveball. When dessert was served, I cleared my throat. "I need to share something," I said, my voice steady but firm. All eyes turned to me. Emma froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "I've recently learned some things about Emma," I continued. "Things that have changed the way I see our marriage." Her father frowned. "What are you talking about, Matthew?" I opened the folder and slid it onto the table. "These," I said, "are emails and photographs that show Emma has been unfaithful. For 6 months, while she claimed to be on a business trip, she was living with another man." A stunned silence fell over the room. Emma's mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her brother swore under his breath. Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Matt, stop this. We don't need to involve them." "Yes, we do," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. "They deserve to know the truth." Her father flipped through the folder, his expression growing darker with each page. When he finally looked up, there was no hiding his disappointment. "Emma," he said quietly, "is this true?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "I made a mistake." Her mother shook her head, looking utterly heartbroken. "How could you do this, Emma? To Matthew? To us?" I stood, addressing the room. "I've already filed for divorce. Emma and I signed a prenup, so my business and assets are protected. But I wanted you to know what's happened because it affects all of us." I turned to Emma. "I loved you. I gave you everything I had. And this is how you repaid me." She sobbed openly, her defenses crumbling in front of her family. But I felt no pity. She'd made her choices, and now, she had to live with them. The divorce proceedings were swift. The prenup ensured Emma couldn't claim my assets, and the evidence I'd gathered left no room for her to argue. She moved out of our home within a month, leaving behind an empty shell of the life we'd built together. Daniel, meanwhile, was forced to shutter his consultancy as his clients abandoned him. The scandal had destroyed his reputation, and from what I heard, he was struggling to stay afloat. As for Emma, she tried to rebuild her life, but her ruined reputation made it nearly impossible. Clients didn't trust her, friends distanced themselves, and even her family struggled to look her in the eye. I should have felt vindicated. In a way, I did. But more than anything, I felt relief. Relief that I was free of the lies, the betrayal, the toxicity. Sitting in my new apartment months later, I looked out the window at the city skyline, a quiet peace settling over me. I learned the hard way that trust can be the most fragile thing, I thought, sipping my coffee. Emma shattered it, but she also taught me my worth. Betrayal isn't just the end of a relationship, it's a chance to rebuild your life on stronger ground. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. What would you have done in my shoes? Was my revenge just or too far?